Hello, and thank you for joining us here on France 24. It's time for us to cast our collective eye on Africa. First up, the headlines. Uganda is in shock after 4 children were killed in a brutal attack at a kindergarten in Kampala. The 30-year-old suspect is in custody and an investigation into his motives is underway. Sudanese military leader and head of state Abdel Fattah al-Burhan appoints Yasir al-Atta as the new armed forces chief of staff. The change comes as the army tries to defend its last position in Darfur. And a little over a week until the Beninese people head to the polls for the country's general election, the opposition party is in crisis. The leading faction, the Democrats, faces internal divisions, a succession battle, and political realignments. Welcome to the program. Ugandans are in shock after 4 children were killed in a brutal attack at a kindergarten in Kampala. A man in his 30s, posing as a parent, fatally stabbed 3 boys and 1 girl. Angry residents tried to lynch him as he attempted to flee before being arrested by the police. Authorities have launched an investigation into his motives, Laurent Berstecher reports.
Their faces distorted by grief. Oblivious to the comforting words of police officers, these parents were still in a state of shock as they tried to come to terms with the horror that unfolded. Moments earlier, a man walked into a nearby kindergarten and stabbed several toddlers to death.
The suspect allegedly came a few days ago looking for admission in the school, and he was told to return today, which he did, and also paid for the admission fee, and then after went and attacked the kids that were playing in the school compound, killing 4 of them.
The suspect then attempted to flee, but was caught and beaten up by a crowd of passerbys before being handed over to police. He's since refused to explain the motives behind his actions.
We don't know him. He's not from the area. I was able to talk to him after he was detained. I asked him why he killed these children, but he didn't answer.
The attack sparked a wave of anger and outrage across Uganda, with the chief of the country's armed forces calling for the perpetrator to be sentenced to death.
General Yasir al-Atta has been appointed as the new Chief of Staff of the Sudanese Armed Forces. A member of the country's Sovereign Council, he served as assistant to the Commander-in-Chief, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. The change comes as the army still tries to hold on to its last position in Darfur and is being pushed back in the Kordofan region by the Rapid Support Forces paramilitary group. Bastien Renouille tells us more.
Yasir al-Atta's appointment is the most significant personnel shift in the Sudanese military since the beginning of the war against the Rapid Support Forces in 2023. But what could be the impact of this new position? According to several analysts, he could lead a shift in strategy, especially in the southeastern part of Sudan, in the Blue Nile state, where a new front opened recently and where a new strategy could be useful for the Sudanese military. But other analysts believe that there will be no huge difference since he has been on the front line of the war since the beginning and since he has left his imprint of every major campaign. In 2023, he led the war around Khartoum, the capital, when General al-Burhan, the head of the Sudanese military and the chief of state, was besieged in the military's headquarters in Khartoum. He decided to remain in Omdurman, which is Khartoum's twin city. Until now, he was a member of the Sovereign Council, which is leading Sudan. So his new position will be less political, but he will have a tighter control of the Sudanese military.
On the 12th of April, the Beninese people will head to the polls to elect their new president. The outgoing head of state, Patrice Talon, is not running for re-election, but his protege, Romuald Wadani, will represent the presidential camp. Among the opposition, the situation is far more complicated as the main opposition force is undergoing a deep crisis. Internal divisions, a succession battle, and political realignments, the Les Démocrates party appears to be weakened. Our correspondent Emmanuel Soji sent us this report.
A few weeks ago, Jimmy Tokpe and Eric Hundete were some of the most prominent figures of the main opposition party in Benin, Les Démocrates. For the presidential election, they both chose to support the ruling party's candidate, Romuald Wadani. This decision sent shockwaves through the political landscape.
The party has collapsed because of certain people's actions. We should not be asked to go down with it.
The party, Les Democrats, has suffered several setbacks in recent months. Following tighter electoral rules, it failed to retain its MPs in parliament and was unable to introduce a candidate for the April 12th presidential election. In early March, their leader, former President Thomas Boni Yayi, resigned. Soon after, his son followed and joined the presidential camp.
Since Boni Yayi's departure, the party has been in crisis mode. We have a presidential election coming up whose results are almost certain. Everyone wants to position themselves for the future.
Behind this wave of defections lies a fierce succession battle. Two factions now stand in opposition, one led by Eric Hundete, the interim president after Boni Yayi's resignation, and the other by Nourenu Achade, who was elevated to party leader by his supporters in the midst of the crisis.
A party with two heads cannot function. Have you ever seen a human being with two heads who can survive?
Les Democrats' party is completely split just days before the presidential elections. The Achade faction decided to abstain, while Eric Hundete led the majority to vote for the ruling party. He has since been suspended by his original party, along with around 20 officials who supported him.
As a matter of principle, an opposition party cannot join forces with the presidential camp. It's unimaginable. Those who do have something to hide.
The outcome of the crisis is now being fought in court, with each side challenging the other's legitimacy. According to some sources, there is more at stake than just a political battle. A significant amount of public funding allocated to political parties is also on the line.
The United Nations has expressed its shock over the brutal killing of activist Vigario Luis Balanta in Guinea-Bissau. Found beaten and shot near the capital, Balanta was a vocal critic of the ruling junta. UN human rights officials have called for a thorough and impartial investigation. They've highlighted a worrying crackdown on opposition members, human rights defenders, and civic freedoms since the November 2025 military coup. In Ivory Coast, the consequences of mass evictions, mainly carried out in 2024 in informal neighborhoods, are still being felt by residents today. In the town of Anyama, some neighborhoods have been left without running water for several months. The reason? A water network that cannot cope with a city whose population has doubled following the arrival of thousands of displaced residents. Julia Guggenheim and Damien Kofi explain.
The same scene plays out every day in this neighborhood of Anyama, outside Abidjan. Women wait for several hours to collect drinking water from this tanker truck.
There's no water in this neighborhood. We're exhausted. The tanker only comes twice a week. That's not enough.
This is the result of an underdeveloped water network. Local authorities say Anyama's population has doubled since 2024, following eviction operations in Abidjan. Around 30,000 people were affected when their neighborhoods were demolished due to flood risks and infrastructure development.
The municipality of Anyama is experiencing a widespread water shortage. This is due to populations who were evicted from certain neighborhoods in the Abidjan district as part of major infrastructure projects, notably the construction of bridges.
While tanker deliveries provide some relief, the shortage is costly for residents, many of whom now buy water from boreholes.
Here, 10 jerry cans cost 1,500 CFA francs, and in a week we can use more than 50 jerry cans.
This father, who supports a family of 7, spends 35,000 CFA francs on water, an enormous sum for many families in this working-class town, where the monthly minimum wage is about 75,000 CFA francs.
Before, water came occasionally, once or twice a week from the tap. But now there's been no water at all for 2 months. I bought this. It's what we drink. The water we collect outside, we don't know what's in it. We don't know how it's been treated.
Work is underway to expand the water network in Anyama, but local authorities say the planned upgrades are unlikely to meet the growing demand.
And Christians around the world marked Good Friday with prayer, celebrations, and reenactments of Jesus Christ's last moments, including his crucifixion. In South Sudan, thousands of Catholics marched through the streets of the capital, Juba, to pray for peace in the country, which is on the brink of a civil war. Over the past several weeks, there's been a surge in fighting between government forces loyal to President Salva Kiir and opposition militias loyal to Riek Machar, the vice president who was suspended from office and placed under house arrest a year ago. That's all from us for the moment. Stay tuned to France 24. We'll be right back with more news.